This is a bit of a random video discussing examples of some skincare brands that are acting weird. And I guess what I mean by that is a level of disrespect towards customers. There's maybe no other way to put it. It's just where marketing, weaseling your way, between regulations and that sort of thing. It's just not the way brands should act. I think you can run a business without being, shady about it. I love the skincare industry and I of course understand it's a business first, but maybe naively I can think people can, make money, they can run a business, they can earn a profit while still doing the right thing. You can sell things and not be a complete jerk about it. Also, just to preface this, it's not supposed to be any type of cancel culture video. I don't hate any of these brands. Ultimately, skincare brands are often very large companies with tons of people involved. Sometimes bad decisions are made by one or two bad eggs in the company, then they leave and then the company's different after that. All sorts of reasons, all sorts of things are involved within running a brand. So I'm just using this more so for example purposes and just for general awareness that I think there's a requirement for all skincare brands to do better. Please don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep chatting. I'd love to film more of these random chit chat videos. I think they're the most interesting, at least they're the fun for me. So we'll see how this goes. Oh, and just to cover some housekeeping, everything I say in this video is alleged information. It's for entertainment purposes only. And of course, it's just my opinion, not necessarily based in fact. So you should verify yourself and always check with the brand if you have any questions or queries. So I've sort of set this up just in a few key dot points and then I'll have a brand example for each point. Oh, and also just to mention, I have discussed some of these things individually before. So this is sort of bringing a few different points together just in one video. So the first point is white label products or white label brands. So if you don't know what white labeling is, it's basically where a brand can kind of pop up overnight because really all they're doing is buying pre-made formulations. So all of the testing, all of the formula is already done and they're just essentially sticking their own label on an existing formula. Sometimes this is a way for new brands to get their foot in the door because obviously formulation is very time consuming and very costly. And sometimes brands might move into original formulation after they've established themselves using white label product. I'm a little bit undecided on my own opinion or my own tolerance of white labeling. I'm just not sure it should exist at all because we don't need copycat products on the market. That's really what waste is. If something already exists and you're just photocopying it with a different label, what are you actually achieving? What are you adding to the conversation? What are you adding to the market? It ends up being just 100% a business decision without any vision. And I think that pisses me off, honestly. It's something that used to not bother me. And maybe there's still context where, if it's one product out of 10, maybe that's okay. But I think if a whole brand is based on white labeling, I just think that's unnecessary. One particular example I have that is probably the most frustrating example is a brand from Dr. Lara Devgan, basically a plastic surgeon who is charging hundreds of dollars per bottles for all of these formulations. But in reality, these products are all entirely generic. Allegedly. The exact same product, allegedly, is available from multiple different brands with much better pricing. Now, if this plastic surgeon's brand was retailing at a lower price point, then maybe I could forgive it, but it's the markup on something that they've had absolutely no input in, allegedly, that is very frustrating. I'm personally absolutely not interested in helping to fund a brand that puts in no effort in their product design. This brand exists because they're able to trade on the doctor in the title, which, as we can see, because it's allegedly a generic formulation, is absolutely meaningless. From what I've seen, the brands, I think it's Dermatology, I'm pretty sure Replenix, as I said, Dr. Lara Devgan. I'm pretty sure these are all white label brands. Having said that, I'm not 100% sure if every single product in these brands is white label. There could be a handful that are, there could be a handful that are original. I haven't checked all of them. It was just a couple and that was enough for me to write them off. And it's actually very difficult to tell what is white labeling. There's really no way to know. The only way that I've been able to figure out how to do it is by literally copy pasting the Inky list into Google, and then you'll see if that same Inky list is repeated by brands. As I said earlier, I'm not like 100% sure on what my opinion is on white labeling, but maybe at a minimum requirement, I think there should be some regulatory disclosure where people know that it's generic. It's kind of like when you go to a pharmacy and there's like a generic version of a drug and a brand name. It's totally great that they both exist, but at least people know that one is generic and one is the brand name. If we're kept in the dark, that's a level of dishonesty that I'm not comfortable with. The next point is price harmonization. With the popularity and the advent of social media, we all have eyes everywhere, so there's nowhere to hide. It therefore makes absolutely no sense to me that brands still don't operate with a global vision or global scale in mind. If you're a brand that operates in multiple countries, there should be no reason that pricing isn't consistent across the board. As an example, Kiehl's released like a squalane balm not too long ago. It retails for 90 Australian dollars, which is the equivalent of around 58 US dollars. However, the same product in the US retails for 32 USD. That's a huge variation that makes absolutely no sense. I understand that different countries have different import requirements and different regulations that may sometimes add to the cost. So a few dollars here and there, I'm totally fine to accept. But this example is like not far off being double the price. And it's a little stick of squalane. Even the full retail price in the US is way overpriced. But let's assume that there are different operational requirements and associated logistics costs for operating in different regions. If you're a global skincare company, there's absolutely no excuse that planning isn't built into the price point. Those costs are not surprises. You know, Kiehl's has been in Australia for as long as I can remember, at least decades. I'm sure they've operated in multiple regions across the world. Like, there's no reason they don't know what these costs are. So it's just overall nonsensical to me to have such varied pricing in different markets. It takes me 10 seconds to look up a USD price versus AUD price. So if you think I'm like happily buying things here just because you can charge more, like that's lunacy and again, dishonest. In a reverse example, let's take Aven, which is actually much cheaper to buy in Australia and Europe than it is in the US. And the only reason for that is because Aven has somehow been able to position themselves as more of a pro brand in the US. So they just charge more for it. There's no logistical reason for it other than marketing, allegedly. These days, I'm starting to check every product that I buy to ensure there's a level of reasonable price parity across regions, because I'm certainly not absorbing extra costs because brands are incompetent or dishonest. Number 3 is brands are able to buy medical expertise. One major change that has shifted in social media over the last couple of years really is the prevalence of doctors, just physicians in general, or other like so-called experts. This has given rise to a lot of physician marketing, like every second ad on social media is coming from a doctor. They are now in the exact same category as influencers. And tons of brands are capitalizing on this, really using doctors as a way of adding like a medical lean or clinical relevant component to their skincare launches. This is also something that I kind of argue with myself about in my head, because on one hand, I think there's just a baseline ethical issue with doctors promoting cosmetic brands, because cosmetics and medicines are intentionally supposed to be very separate fields. But at the same time, cosmetics and dermatology, they do overlap, and, ingredients are shared across the spectrum. So if a product uses ingredients that dermatologists do genuinely use, in clinic, then it's probably fair that they're able to actually promote them, as an actual advertisement. I think these days, though, the actual line of what is reasonably being promoted by derms and other physicians versus what is just bullshit, the line has been blurred to the point that it doesn't exist anymore. You can tell this by the fact that there are lots of brands now that are probably like inherently anti-science, but you still have many physicians, willingly promote them. One example I can think of is a brand called OneSkin, and they're a brand that sort of touts this exclusive peptide that apparently targets cellular senescence, which is like a catchphrase or marketing phrase that many, many other brands are using as the new wave of anti-aging. I don't think that medical doctors should be promoting brands like this at all, because anything to do with like cellular activity is no longer a cosmetic claim. And a brand like OneSkin just absolutely does not have the necessary evidence to make a drug claim. And if they did, they'd have to go through FDA regulations. happens. So this brand, this product cannot be substantially effective enough to warrant the promotion of a medical doctor. It's just incredibly shady because the level of evidence they offer is cosmetic leaning. It does not have clinical standing. Now, I haven't worked with OneSkin personally. I don't have any interest in the brand at all. They sent me a PR kit a little while ago that I didn't even open. I received it without reading the website, so I understand how people can fall into the trap of maybe promoting a brand accidentally. But when you actually sign a contract to advertise for a brand, you should know what you're doing at that point. So all these doctors that are promoting skincare brands, all they do is literally repeat word for word what's in the marketing brief. They don't do any independent vetting. They don't do any checking. It's just an ad. But because they hold a doctor physician title, it's sort of seen with some sort of higher level of authority or relevance, as if it's dermatologist approved, but they're not approving anything. Those products are already done. The marketing copy has already gone through legal. They're doing absolutely nothing different to any regular person on the street. And that's really where I have a problem. I think a doctor title at least should mean something. And again, I'm not necessarily objecting to doctors being able to promote products. I'm just objecting to them doing absolutely nothing to vet what they're doing, to vet what they're saying. And part of this really just becomes a problem when they do work for brands like OneSkin that really have a lot of content around that fearmongers a lot of what dermatologists are supposed to stand for. So as an example, they have articles on their website talking about how it's dangerous to use chemical sunscreen filters, which is absolutely not supported by any real world evidence. So why in the world is a doctor promoting a brand that is telling everybody to not use chemical filters? That is the antithesis of the role of a physician, which should be promoting science. OneSkin have also published a few different articles sort of bad-mouthing retinoids, and they tout all of this research they've done, which is absolute nonsense because all of their research is from a handful of days. It's entirely irrelevant from a clinical perspective. But again, you then have ads from doctors that have been paid for to just repeat marketing copy for a brand that is denigrating a retinoid, which is one of the key pillars of dermatology. It is ridiculous. When expertise becomes for sale in the way that it has, then the whole field becomes useless and doctors are giving other doctors a bad name. And I just wish all of these medical boards, the whole board certified, I wish that meant something. Where is the board to actually control some of these doctors, not all, some of these bad eggs that are absolutely doing nothing but shilling for brands? The next point is ridiculous luxury. If you followed me for a while, you'll know that I have no beef with luxury brands as a concept or as a category. Chanel is one of my favorite brands. I love a lot of La Mer products. Augustin Espada, I think, makes some nice products too. But what these brands all have in common is a level of originality. These formulations you will not find elsewhere. The ingredient combinations are often unique. The packaging is often customized. They use custom fragrances, often even grow their own ingredients. Plus, many of these luxury brands also operate retail locations, which adds a whole extra piece to the puzzle. But then we have these, I guess you could say fake luxury brands. In this example, Westman Atelier, which seems to be a brand that just exists to charge customers as much as possible for no good reason. They were birthed out of this clean beauty movement because clean makeup had its moment for a second. And don't get me wrong, I think the packaging they offer looks really nice. I think, the makeup formulations, they might be lovely. I'm pretty sure Gucci Westman is an actual makeup artist, so her expertise in color combinations and so on probably makes sense. So there is a level of value on the makeup side. But more recently, they've released a vitamin C serum, which is probably one of the most ridiculous skincare releases I've ever seen. The vitamin C they're selling is 20 mil, first of all. They charge hundreds of dollars for this. But forget the price. All they have in this product is one ingredient, one raw ingredient and nothing else. They've just repackaged 100% of what a supplier sells, put it in Westman packaging with a massive, massive markup. It's kind of like what The Ordinary used to do when they first started, except The Ordinary was a few dollars and Westman is hundreds of dollars. There is no planet where anybody would need 100% of a vitamin C derivative on their skin. Westman touts a specialized supplier in Japan, super high quality, blah, blah, blah. But regardless of where it's coming from or the quality of the ingredient, who Like, where has it been established that you actually need to use 100% of this ingredient? In many cases, less than 5% of tetrahexadecyl ascorbate is totally sufficient. Like, most suppliers suggest use up to 30% at a push. And like, I'm not saying that Westman is doing anything that wasn't approved by the supplier. I'm sure they were like, it's fine to use this version 100% on the skin. But who cares? Just because something is okay to use, is there actually any relevant reason to do so? You can buy pure THD from a DIY website for like $40, which already has a retail markup on it. Then that's for 30 mils, so even more than what Westman sells for. When you have a natural extract, like a plant extract or an oil, there can be like tons of natural variation. So when you're sourcing natural ingredients, a price per kilo can vary quite a lot, because some cosmetic ingredients are sold with a standardized amount of like active in the extract, whereas you can get cheaper ingredients that are just going to be seasonally varied in terms of the quality of a skincare product. So in that sense, price can matter a lot. But in this case, THD is an isolated molecule. So to my knowledge, it's not sold in grades, unless the supplier has maybe made up their own grade, which is maybe what has happened here. And I don't have access to all supplier information. So at this point, I'm not saying that I'm dead set right. And I don't see where the logic would be in an isolated molecule having a different effect on the skin unless there are additional supporting ingredients involved. Which leads me to the next point. This product has no supporting ingredients. So let's even put aside the fact that it's a single ingredient supplier provided product. There's just no product design. There is no formulation to speak of here. That's not a luxury experience. It's really just a joke. Like, you're passing on raw materials. It would be kind of like, let's say, a designer, Louis Vuitton, Celine, Dior, if they just took a sheet of fabric and sold that for $5,000 without doing any stitching, without doing any cutting, without doing any design. People can argue all they want what the value of luxury is, which I know is an entirely different conversation, but there's at least some level of work involved when you buy a luxury anything. This is doing absolutely nothing. Westman is just charging as much as they can because they can. I assume they have a level of built-in client, and it's just entirely unnecessarily and honestly ridiculous. As an example, let's say Westman used 50% of this ingredient and then blended it in with a few other, ingredients to help with hyperpigmentation or redness or just additional antioxidants. Then at least they've attempted to make a well-rounded product. They've put some effort into design. Westman will go around telling you this is pure, and I'm telling you it's just pure greed, it's laziness, and bottom of the barrel effort, which is absolutely not what a luxury brand should be. And the last point I'll make is brands like happily ignoring regulations. The truth is, skincare brands have set and pretty easy to follow parameters in terms of what they're allowed to say. Many of them do choose to kind of cross the line of marketing language, because I guess a lot of them hope that if they cross the line a little bit, they won't be found out. And any little bit of marketing edge you can get will be helpful, considering it's such a saturated market. It's sometimes worth the risk to get slapped on the chin by a regulatory body because you would have already collected years of sales ahead of that. And I guess from like a personal opinion perspective, I don't so much like worry or care about brands stretching certain claims. For example, a lot of brands use anti-aging terminology. They might talk about collagen, elastin, cellular senescence, all of these things. They are ultimately made up terms with really no measurable definition. So if a brand wants to talk about cells, collagen, elastin, I don't really care, just as long as there's no implication from like a medical authority that these products have the same standing as an actual drug treatment. But where I think there is a problem is when brands cross the line and they start interfering with actual medical conditions. Because in some ways there's potential for skincare brands to get in the way of people actually seeking proper care for their skincare concern. Ultimately, regulations exist to protect consumers. And so when brands bypass these things intentionally just for sales, when that's definitely not in the best interest of the public, it's just like not necessary. I have two specific and slightly different examples. One is from La Roche-Posay, and this is going back a few years now, but they got a warning from the FDA because a lot of their products were being as marketed for rosacea treatment. And essentially it's the FDA's perspective that something that something like rosacea shouldn't be self-diagnosed. So a cosmetic brand should not be making claims that is not within their lane of like operation. And so if somebody is routinely buying La Roche-Posay or other cosmetic brands because they think they have a certain type of rosacea, the product doesn't work, they move on to another product. You're in this cycle of just buying and buying and buying cosmetic products when one visit with a doctor would be able to tell you what type of rosacea you'd have and what effective treatments are actually available. A different example, which I've spoken about a lot recently, is from Paula's Choice and how they've chosen to bypass Australian sunscreen regulations. They've basically done this by calling their product a makeup-like product or a tinted base, even though this sunscreen is promoted as a primary sunscreen in all other markets. And because they've able to position this as a tinted base, it basically escapes the purview or visibility of the TGA. And that means that we as consumers have far less checks and balances. Now, from the feedback I've gotten on this sunscreen in particular, some people don't care because they're kind of happy that we just have more sunscreen options around. But the thing is, you should care, because brands that cut corners in one way, who knows if they're cutting corners in other ways? Maybe a weasel is just a weasel by nature. And if something were to go wrong with this sunscreen, it would just be much harder to have something enforced against it, because the TGA is not really monitoring it, so nobody's going to be looking to ensure that it's actually protecting skin properly. Anyway, that's enough of me being a downer. As I said at the start, I love the skincare industry, so this video is not supposed to be like some hate-filled dribble. It's because I love the industry that I want brands to play fair, not only for the benefit of consumers and to ensure that cosmetic brands are staying within their lane, but also so that there's fair competition between each other. Like, it's not fair if one brand decides to bypass regulations and benefits from all of these extra sales because they're overstepping, versus another brand that's doing the right thing. But people, like customers, don't really see that. They just think the brand that's doing the right thing because the claims are so much more exorbitant, because they have more availability of product, that somehow that makes their product better, when really it's the brands that are doing the right thing that are the good brands. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any feedback on any of these topics in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.